questions and a good discussion of the issues that face our community. First of all, I would like to introduce the head table to my immediate right. Someone most of you probably recognize, our Mayor Mike Kadis. And to my, we're going to applaud. An opportunity for an ovation here. And left Bill Carey, who is one of our three commissioners. And seated next to Bill is Kim Luttrell, who is the CEO of the Missoula Area Chamber of Commerce. And on the far left is Miss Vicki Judd, who is Manager of Administration at Northwestern Energy and is also the chair of our Community Affairs Committee in the Chamber, who organizes and hosts this event. So. And I'm Bob Bush. I'm the past president of the Missoula Area Chamber, and sitting in today for Bob Tutsky, who is our current president, who could not be here today. He's out of town. And so I'll try to keep this all moving along well so that you all have a chance to take maximum opportunity to benefit from your time here. We need to begin by kind of setting the ground rules for our discussion and questions today, so I'd like to invite Ms. Vicki Judd to do that for us. Vicki?
Thank you. Okay, the rules are pretty simple. There are none. Actually, there are. I think all of you see a copy of an agenda on your table. Pay attention to that. It's just a great honor to be able to host this again on behalf of the Community Affairs Committee and the entire Chamber of Commerce. We were absolutely thrilled to see all of you here. I was thinking, as I looked across this room, had we had the U.S. Supreme Court justices here, we could probably do rival the President's State of the Union address. This is pretty incredible. So thank you all very much for coming. We truly appreciate Mayor Kadis and Commissioner Carey for giving up their time for doing this. Jim Leiter is sitting in front of us, and he's going to be our somewhat polite Sergeant at Arms. Both Mayor Kadis and Commissioner Carey will have 20 minutes each to give a presentation. We'll be getting some flags towards the end of their allotted time. When they're through, we're going to open it up for general questions and answers. We'd love for you to ask these folks anything that's on your mind that either pertains to what they have talked about or something that's outside of what they spoke about today. Please keep your questions short and concise so we can get as many in them as possible. And then we'd like to offer you the opportunity when this soiree is done to stay and get involved in the Mayor's Growth Puzzle. I believe he has 5 copies with him? 4, excuse me, thanks. And we would love you to see what it is. Some of us would have an opportunity to look at it and get a hands-on feel for it, but it's a great opportunity. So if there's not any questions, without further ado, I'd like to present Bob, who will give a bio on Mayor Mike Kadis.
Thank you, Vicki. Certainly a man who needs no introduction, who well known in our community and has served as our mayor for some time. But I would like to introduce Mayor Kadis by sharing a little bit about him. Mike was appointed mayor of Missoula by the City Council in 1996 and was elected then as mayor in 1997. He was re-elected for a second time in November of 2001. Mike was a member of the Montana State Legislature from 1982 to 1996 and served on a wide variety of committees, including 8 years on the Appropriations Committee. He has also taught economics as an adjunct faculty at the University of Montana here in Missoula. Mike received his Bachelor of Arts degree in Philosophy and Economics in 1989, and then his Master's of Arts in Economics in 1995. Mike currently serves as the president of the Montana League of Cities and Towns, as well as the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors. We welcome Mike Kadis to share with us some of his thoughts regarding the city of Missoula. Mike?
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this. I enjoy it. I got my presentation done a little early this year, about 20 minutes ago. So Okay. Can everyone hear okay? Let me briefly introduce my board of directors, the Missoula City Council. I think starting in the back, I see Jack Reedy, who is the president, once again. Ann Kazmierzak, Ed Childers, John Engen, Don Nicholson, Clayton Floyd, Jerry Ballas, Bob Lovegrove. Yeah, that's a good idea to stand up, and then we'll know which ones of you I've missed. Stacy Rye and Heidi Kendall. Any others? Just note that right next to Mr. Lovegrove, the former mayor, is another former mayor, Dan Kemmis, and I suspect kind of floating around here are John Toole and Bill Craig. I will just get into this. This is on your table. This comes out of a project we started last fall with the County Commission and the Center for the Rocky Mountain West, the University of Montana, the Missoula Area Economic Development Corporation, and the Montana Community Development Corporation. And it is, we held one meeting last fall to start talking about what the economic base and framework of our community is today, and it's changed quite a bit. And with the hope of then transitioning that meeting into some other meetings, we're scheduling one, I think we'll probably do it in May, to talk about more specific areas of the Missoula economy and how we might channel our efforts to try to, first of all, move towards developing and diversifying our own economy, making it more stable. The other part of this project is that the other major cities in the state are doing just about the same kind of a thing. And it's interesting, we all started talking about it a couple years ago, and it has coalesced into something where we're all having these types of discussions in our communities, and hopefully we will be able to develop some kind of a statewide agenda that affects all of our communities and tries to work with the state in ways that cities can really become an important part of our economy and our state. And I think that's one of the hurdles that we in Missoula have faced, and I think all the cities in Montana face it. And that is essentially, unlike most states where you have a dominant urban metropolitan area that sets an agenda for the state for urban issues, we don't have that. We are spread out enough by distance and by population that we don't have a dominant urban area. And as a consequence, there has never been a dominant urban agenda for Montana. And the only way we're going to get to that is by working with other cities in Montana, Billings and Bozeman, Helena, Great Falls, Butte, and Kalispell. And we're moving in that direction. And this is one of the concrete pieces to come out of that. I think you will see similar pieces like this in other communities. And I really want to extend my appreciation to the Center for the Rocky Mountain West for helping to find the funding to create documents like this and help us put on these kinds of forums. So I just ask, take your time and take a look at this. I hope that you learned something from it. If you have questions, please let us know. And if you are interested in participating as we move this dialogue forward, let us know about that as well. I'm going to take some slides that were from this presentation and talk about our local economy first. Claire, let's go to the next one. There are two major points that I think we need to understand as far as our economy goes. We have always had a tendency to look at what we've had and what's changed and bemoan the change. And I think first of all, we need to understand in Missoula that we are a part of the national economy. And there is nothing that affects us more than what happens at the national level. And we really don't have the ability to affect that very much at all. We need to adapt to it. We need to understand it and then adapt to it. That's the first thing. The second thing is we need to understand what directions our economy is going. And I don't think we've done a particularly good job of that in the past either. The economy is a big enough thing that for a city government or a county government or even a state government, it's not the kind of thing that you can push around. it's going to do what it's going to do. And what we have to do is adapt to what it's doing. And to do that, we have to understand it. One of the things that's been happening recently is that urban areas are becoming more important in Montana. And if you look at the top graph, you see urban areas. These are trade areas, really. So it's for Billings, it's Billings and the counties that surround Yellowstone County. For Missoula, it's Missoula, Ravalli County, Granite County, Mineral, Lake, and Sanders may be in there as well. What you see here, though, is that pretty steady increase in those city-centered regions. If you look at the graph down below, what's important to acknowledge here is how to press the right button. There we go. This gap here, this distance over the 20-year period, cities are growing faster than any place else in the state, urban counties. Counties that are associated with urban counties are growing next fastest. And if you're not next to an urban county, you're actually declining in population. And that's just the way things are working. I mean, it's not necessarily good or bad. That's the way it is. We need to acknowledge that and try to understand that. If we could go to the next one. The big changes in our economy, and I've talked about this before, are that we're changing from a commodities export economy to a services economy. And if you look at that top blue line, that's services. That's changes over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, we were very dependent on timber products, and we have, with national interest rates, again, a national change that we had no control over in the late 70s, the housing market fell out the bottom, and timber went with it. And as a consequence, we had 50% vacancy rates downtown and a very high unemployment rate. We have since recovered from that, and it's been largely because of these changes in the service economy. These services are often described as low wage, and that is not the case. I'll show you in a minute. Let's go to the next one. We'll look at income. No, back up one. There we go. This is income change by sector, and again, you can see huge increases in the service. Now, what you do see here is that manufacturing, which is the next line on the left, the blue line, that is actually, it hasn't declined significantly, it just hasn't grown. And that's important to acknowledge over time. We've lost a fair amount of wood products. We've had stone container and Smurfit stone now. It hasn't remained steady. It has been kind of a basic part of that manufacturing economy. It hasn't changed very much at all over the time. But we've also got some new things coming in, things like printing, other non-durable goods type of creation. Brewing is one of them. So those are positive things, and we need to capitalize on those. The other thing I think that's important to recognize here is that in terms of income, retail stays just about the same. It hasn't moved around very much at all. And I think that's a surprise to a lot of people too, because we have this notion that we've become this huge regional trade center. But in terms of its share of the economy, from 1980 to now, it hasn't changed very much at all. But the big changes that have happened, services have gone up, manufacturing as a share of the total economy has gone down. This is income, not jobs. Let's go to the next one. We need to look at ourselves in terms not just, we have to have some perspective. And so a good perspective is to look at the Rocky Mountain West. We can do the same thing nationally, but this is an area, the Rocky Mountain West, that has been growing faster than just about any other region in the country. And if you compare these graphs over time, what you see is that we're doing just about exactly what this fast-growing region of the country is doing. So the changes that are happening in Missoula are not unusual or necessarily negative. If we look at one of the fastest-growing areas in the country, they're actually pretty positive. We're mirroring what they're doing. Let's go to the next one. If we dig a little deeper and look at some of the subsectors in our economy, you can see that on the service side, healthcare has been the big driver, with some other elements that are increasing, but not at nearly the rate that healthcare has. If you look at the older parts of the economy, here's lumber and wood products, and we all know that that's happened. You can't close mills down without seeing that, and we've had a number of mill closures since 1980. Actually, even more if you go back to 75. And then there are some other parts that we've known have been important over here. Wholesale trade is kind of a surprise in that it's been growing pretty steadily. Trucking has always been pretty strong, particularly over the last 20 years. It's been a growing and a real anchor part of our economy. And communications. Communications is interesting because if we look at the Rocky Mountain West, which we'll do on the next slide, I think. No, all right, we'll get to it in a minute. Communications is one of those places that's booming. And so it points to an area where maybe we have some opportunities. But here's just another way of looking at these sectors. Again, healthcare, special trade contractors, that's kind of folks who are building houses and commercial buildings, everyone except general contractors. Business services, this is accounting, all kinds of different services that businesses used to do for themselves, often do, now they hire it out. Real estate is obviously tied to growth, but wholesale trade is a trade center issue. Engineering and management services, very much like business services, and communications. And then down at the other end, you see where we are losing. Let's go to the next one. This is for the region. Again, this is for the Rocky Mountain West. You see all these numbers are in billions. But it's a similar kind of change. You see a number of these services. This is fire insurance and real estate and business services, then healthcare services. So I think that tells me that we probably have some opportunities in business services and in finance, insurance, and real estate. Again, you look at what's going down, same kind of picture. The development and export of gross commodities. Let's go to the next one. One of the things that, one of the points I'm trying to make here is that cities are pretty important as this new economy develops. When we were a natural resource-based economy, a city is very helpful to have because the development of those natural resources, there are certain economic things that are needed in terms of labor, in terms of financing, but the resource is really not dependent on the location of a city nearby. What it's really dependent on is where that commodity is created, whether it's a mine or timber or agriculture. It comes from a particular place. And so the city would eventually be conveniently located to help out those things and make those things possible. As that part of the economy declines and services become more important, the city becomes more important because for a service economy and a knowledge economy, what you have to have is concentration. It is the concentration of various markets, labor markets in particular, but also financial markets, all kinds of business services markets that are the engine that make the economy go anymore. You're creating things that you're exporting. Now we have this mindset that creating things that we export always had to come out of the ground. But we create things that we export now that come out of our heads and out of our communities. And that's very positive. That's a lot more flexible. But cities are much more important in that kind of an economic model than they were in a natural resource development kind of a model. And that's a transition that I think we're making. But if we're going to make it well, we have to understand the value of cities. And cities are not an easy thing for Montanans to wrestle with. I mean, we have some really some examples of cities that we don't like very well. The first one is Butte in the 1920s. I mean, you have this great, bustling, 24-hour city of 100,000 people in 1918. And what has it done since then? It has declined for 80 years, 85 years. And even when it was at its height, it wasn't a place you necessarily wanted to send your children. So our sense of cities in Montana has not always been real good. Missoula felt some of that in the late 60s and early 70s because of our concern about some international affairs. So, but my point is that cities are really critical today, and we need to take care of them. One of the things that you have to do to take care of them is you have to pay taxes. So this is for the state of Montana, and in absolute terms, that's the top graph, and then if we adjust it for inflation, that's the bottom graph, and you don't see too much change over time. Let's go to the next slide. If you look at taxes in terms of personal income, you see a major decline, and that's, going from 10% to less than 8% is a huge shift. And I think that public institutions across the state and here as well are suffering from that. And there's this great piece of rhetoric that says, you can't tax your way to prosperity. I fundamentally disagree. It's not that you tax your way to prosperity, but if you're not willing to spend some money on public services, you don't have a chance at prosperity. You have to have public infrastructure. You have to have sewer and street systems. You have to have public safety. You have to have fire and police. If you really want a quality of life, you have to have park systems. You have to have schools. All those things take tax dollars. Now, it's not like we just throw money at those things and it happens. We have to be wise about how we do it. But we have had the attitude in this state, and not so much in this community, but in this state, that taxes are a bad thing and we should avoid them at all costs. And I think we are doing so at our own detriment. And that kind of statistic tells me one of the reasons why this state is in such difficult straits as it is, because we are unwilling to make public investments. Let's go to the next one. We've been doing some analysis for the city to try to understand how we will balance our budgets over the next 10 years. And this just shows the next 5 years, actually the next 4. But the fundamental problem we've got is we have about a $30 million general fund and about a $100 million all funds budget. But that general fund is really what does that's where most of our important services are, and that's where the real crunch comes from. And we spend about 70% of our general fund on wages and benefits. Wages and benefits are probably going to go up at least 3% a year. That's probably conservative. On the revenue side, we get 50% of our revenue from property taxes. And property taxes are capped and won't go up more than about 1% a year, 50% of the last 3-year average of CPI. Ultimately, that's not going to work. We're going to be out of balance. And so that's what this shows, is kind of how that balance works. And this is very preliminary. It's a tool we're developing for the council and for the staff to try to understand the bigger picture. But it's necessary, and what it shows, just in terms of orders of magnitude, is that over the long term, we have some problems, and we're going to have to we're either going to have to cut levels of service, or we're going to have to find new ways to raise revenue. Let's go to the next one. One of the things that's going to impact us greatly is our own population. This is demographic change over the last 10 years. And so we had growth here, young people, ages, these are essentially college students primarily. That's the expansion of the university. And over here, these are baby boomers. Over the next 10 years, this cohort will then shift to the right. And this cohort a lot of them will probably leave and go and live other places. They came here to go to school, and some of them will stay. A lot of you are here probably because you came to go to school here without thinking that you'd stay, but it happens. But a lot of people go back home or to California, wherever. But this is the one we really need to focus on. This is where most of the growth is going to come from, and these are the types of people who are going to be looking for houses and new places to live over the next 10 years. Let's go to the next one. If we look at our population, you can see this is for the county in this column, and you can see we've grown pretty steadily, 22, 26, 30%, 30%, and then we had the 80s, only 4%, but then for the 90s we were back at 22%. And so we've extrapolated and just said, well, if we continue to grow at 22%, what's our population going to be? We did the same thing countywide for housing units, 23% between 90 and 2000, and then extrapolated on forward. And then for just the urban area, we did it. And we don't have as much data there, but if we go from 28 to 34,000, that's about where we are now. If we extrapolate that forward, in 30 years, we've got to make space for 25,000 new houses. Next. And that gets us to the growth game. It's going to be spread around on some tables here, and I hope you'll take an opportunity to look at it. What we've done is we've created a map of the larger urban area, show the densities of the current neighborhoods, and then the green are all those areas that you can't build. They're either Forest Service land, state land, county land, floodplain, or hillside steeper than 25%. And then we have a bunch of chips. We actually have enough chips that represent 25,000 households. And you can divide them into thirds so that you only had to deal with 10 years worth of growth instead of 30 years worth of growth. Each chip represents 40 dwelling units, and they cover up 40 acres, so 1 dwelling unit per acre. So what the challenge is to take those chips and put them on this map in places that aren't green, and you can stack them and see if you can put them all someplace. And some of you will decide that you want to put them in Stevensville or Frenchtown. And that's great, that's fine, that's an okay decision. But if you do that, then we need to start talking to Stevensville and Frenchtown. Next, please. Another project that I have been working on is Leadership Montana. This has come out of some statewide economic development strategies, and one of the things that folks in Montana, particularly in the business community, have noticed is that we are lacking in leadership. A lot of other states do, we do a leadership Missoula. A lot of other states do a leadership Georgia, whatever it is. And so I was asked to help kind of set up the curriculum along with about 20 other folks. And this is what we're doing, is try to pull together 40 people a year to learn leadership skills and learn about the state and become, one more minute, and become an asset to the rest of our state. So next slide. This is kind of the schedule that they will be going of the various sessions. We've worked up 7 of them, and the variety of things that they'll be looking at. And we hope to do this every year. Next slide. And if you're interested in this, the website is down at the bottom. It's just www.leadershipmontana.org. I'd encourage you to check into this. If you're interested, or if you have an employee who you think could really has potential to be a leader in Montana, check this out. It's not cheap. It will cost $2,500, and there's another $2,500 that's subsidized. It really costs $5,000. But I encourage you or your business to help provide scholarships for people you think would benefit from this and make a contribution to our state by participating in this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. I know it's a challenge to try and communicate all the things that I think we'd all like to know about in such a short time frame, but we do have some time for questions. Bill graduated from the University of California in Riverside with a bachelor's in political science. He's a former Peace Corps volunteer who worked on a project in southern India. Returning from the Peace Corps, he taught at the elementary and middle school level in California's famed Gold Rush country, which is near Sonora. And then for several years co-managed a cooperatively owned retail business in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then he moved to Missoula in 1983. Prior to accepting the position at the food bank, Bill was employed by Missoula Aging Services as their volunteer coordinator for the Meals on Wheels and senior dining room programs. Bill was also the first person elected to chair Montana's Advisory Council on Food and Nutrition, and in 1995 was named that year's Outstanding Fundraising Executive by the Western Montana Fundraisers Association. Bill currently serves on a number of boards, including board of directors for the Western Montana Mental Health Center, Larchmont Golf Course, the Missoula Development Authority's Offer Review and Executive Finance Committees, and the Travelers Rest Preservation and Heritage Association, which oversees the management and development of the new state park just south of us here in Lolo. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Bill Carey. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank the Chamber, too, for this opportunity to help, I hope, help you learn more about our community and about our local governments, and thanks for turning out for this. Barbara Evans called me yesterday morning from St. Patrick Hospital and asked me if I would read her speech, which she'd spent some weeks working on. She asked me to do that because her husband, Alan, the night before, had suffered a very serious cardiac event. So Barbara is with Alan. He's at home, and she's taking good care of him, and I think he's going to be well. So this is Barbara's speech. I'll go ahead and read it as she wrote it, and we'll go from there. Barbara writes, Missoula County is in pretty good condition. The county is a $66 million organization comprised of 45 budgeted funds which encompass all of the county's functions. We have over 700 full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees, making it the largest county government in Montana. We no longer have a financial deficit, and while we aren't rolling in money, she says, we are in stable condition. For the past few fiscal years, we've set our budget priorities to stabilize the county's financial position. As recently as fiscal year 1999, the general fund cash reserves had dipped to dangerously low levels, as little as 3.5% of revenues. One of our top budget priorities was to get the general fund reserves back to an adequate level, and by the end of fiscal year 2003, we achieved our cash reserve goal of 12% of revenues. This was achieved largely through annual budget savings carried over to the subsequent years and restrictions on spending for one-time purposes. County employees, from department heads on down, are, by and large, conscientious stewards of our tax dollars. Another top priority dealt with the idea of long-term sustainability within the budget and avoiding the large swings in cash balances seen in the past. Changes in our budget philosophy were instituted to ensure that ongoing expenses are always funded with ongoing revenues. This philosophy will allow us to avoid many of the financial pitfalls that are occurring in state and local governments across the nation. Although the Missoula economy is booming, rapid growth is putting the greatest strain on county government. The increase in the population is stretching our ability to maintain services, and so is the rapid growth in the trade service area, which exceeds 300,000 people. That puts an additional demand on our roads, sheriff's department, and criminal justice system. We are pleased to announce that we've had a very successful year in regards to our development park. The development park is located just north of the airport. It covers 450 acres of land and is a mixture of industrial uses, parks, trails, and housing. In fiscal year 2003, the county sold 34.5 acres for net proceeds of approximately $2.1 million. The housing development, called Canyon Creek Village, has been very successful. The houses sell before they are finished. The people who live there are very pleased with it. So far, 126 houses have sold, with another 16 under construction, and yet another 150 to 200 will be built in Canyon Creek East, just next door. As you no doubt know, Lithia Motors occupies one of the corner lots on Expressway and Airway Boulevard. The Wingate Hotel is also located on Airway Boulevard. The Wingate made an offer on the corner lot next to them last year. It was refused by the Development Authority because they didn't have a specified use for the land. Later, the county got an offer for the same piece of land by the same auto dealer that already had an option on the land across the street from the hotel. We tried to suggest that the southwest corner would be a more acceptable lot for their intended use, but they refused. Then they came back and offered to purchase all 3 lots on the corner and said if they couldn't have an option on the lot that they originally didn't want, the deal was off. So they had made the lot they didn't want the linchpin of their last offer. They wanted a 2-year option for $5,000 per year with no guarantee they would finalize the purchase. That would have taken 2 of the prime lots off the market for 2 years and would have resulted in auto dealers on all 4 corners of that area. That does not fit the vision of the authority, and although the commissioners accepted their last offer, which was an 18th-month option on the southwest corner at $10,000 per year, they decided to withdraw their offers entirely. This leaves 2 lots still unencumbered and for sale. The Wingate has taken an option on the lot adjoining their hotel, and one of the things we all hope to see there is a restaurant or perhaps a conference center. The development park, Barbara writes, has more than paid for itself. Sales proceeds have been designated for infrastructure projects within the park, with a portion set aside to repay general fund investments. We've demolished the 4th floor of the courthouse that was once the jail. The cells were removed and the concrete bow ties that were in front of the windows were removed. These were very unstable and it wasn't safe to leave them in place. There was asbestos there and it has been abated. Larry Farnes, our facilities manager, used work release folks from Justice Court to demolish it. He saved county taxpayers over $124,000. We will let the bid soon for the reconstruction office space. The remodel of the 4th floor will provide space for the county attorney's office and the information services department. The total project cost is estimated at $2.4 million, with completion expected in fiscal year 2006. The county has already designated $450,000 of reserves, and we budgeted an additional $500,000 in fiscal year 2004. We anticipate the entire project will be funded out of existing resources. The county attorney's office is responsible for the prosecution of all felony offenses and the prosecution of all persons under the age of 18 in youth court. They represent all county departments and many sub-jurisdictions in legal matters. They also represent the state in all proceedings involving enforcement of state laws covering child abuse or neglect and involuntary commitments due to mental illness. Additionally, they serve as public administrators for estates that have no heirs. In 2003, our attorneys filed a total of 873 cases in district court and over 2,500 cases in justice court. Our justice courts are even busier than usual. The overall caseload for Judge Odlin's court has increased by 17% over last year. The 2 justice courts processed over 8,800 cases during 2003. The county attorney's office has a backlog that stretches for months. The department is funded primarily through property tax revenues, and growth in the tax base has not kept up with service demands. This growth on our mandated services will force us to make some difficult decisions in the future. Our venerable courthouse is in good hands. Last year, the old steam boilers were replaced with energy-saving boilers. The exterior of the courthouse was cleaned and resurfaced. The architect estimated that it would have cost $495,000. The actual costs were much less, and we saved over $250,000. Kudos to the facilities manager for these savings and for having taken over the duties of maintaining the partnership health building, the new animal shelter, and also for backing up the crew at the library. A new building was placed at the communications site at Point 118, which doubled the propane storage. This site provides radio coverage for 911 to the Lolo Creek area, Graves Creek, Fish Creek, and the Selway of the Bitterroot. Construction has been completed at the new animal shelter, and it's a very nice facility. We were sued by a business across from the site because they thought it would adversely affect the look of their property, and she says, I can understand their concerns. Some of the animal shelters I've seen are pretty bad. Litigation, however, was abandoned after those folks reviewed our plans for the shelter. If you haven't been there to see it, a drive up Butler Creek would show you what a nice facility it is. But more than looks, it's a safer facility for the animals and the staff. We can now house more dogs and certainly more cats in a cleaner, more attractive shelter. There will be an open house later this spring. You're all invited to come and see this example of city-county cooperation. The Mullins Sewer is nearly complete. The work is ahead of schedule and well within the budget. With the contribution of $1 million from the city and $1.5 million from Congress, it brought the cost to the homeowners there down to more acceptable levels. We received, the county did, $5 million in the last congressional appropriation for beginning the work to provide a bridge across the river from Miller Creek area. The environmental consultants are conducting the necessary work to come up with a recommendation as to where the bridge ought to be located. That, of course, is causing some concern to the residents of the Blue Mountain area. They think it's the first step to putting a bypass around the city through their area. That is absolutely not true. There is no desire to build such a bypass. First, there isn't enough money to consider such a thing, and secondly, it wouldn't carry enough traffic to warrant such a project. The Miller Creek area has only one way in and out, and the traffic backup at the highway is unacceptable. The Y at Upper and Lower Miller Creek is not a safe intersection, and so the County Public Works Director is currently working with the city and local property owners to come up with a redesign of that Y, which will make a lot of sense economically and to move traffic. The McClay Bridge has been redecked last year, and with the structural improvements we've done, will result in a long-term durable surface. The summer fires of 2003 put our emergency services to the test, with major fires burning in virtually every corner of the county. On 2 occasions, one on Black Mountain and one in Petty Creek, over 100 houses were evacuated. There were several other small evacuations, but these were accomplished with no loss of life and little injury. 3 houses on Black Mountain were lost due to the fires, but fortunately many more were saved. we have committed over $160,000 for fuels mitigation work to reduce the fire hazards. We've also started the process of upgrading our aging communications backbone, which allows first responders to talk with each other and with the 911 dispatch center. The project has two phases, upgrading the analog microwave system to a digital system and upgrading the two-way radio equipment to more modern equipment. Total cost of this project is in the neighborhood of $6.7 million. As of today, the county has set aside about $500,000 for this project, and we hope on some federal support for making this a reality. We've also increased our response capability in case of any disaster, either natural or man-caused. From July to September, members from all divisions and volunteer units of the Sheriff's Department provided an unparalleled level of response in population protection, traffic control, and security related to the wildfires throughout Missoula County. Also, on June 14, 2003, Deputy David Conway and Highway Patrolman Jason Hildenstab successfully captured George Harold Davis, ending Davis's spree of death and injury that began in Ennis and ended on Lolo Pass. The detention facility, under the direction of Captain Susan Hinz and Chief Detention Officer Mark Foss, continues to serve as an example of how well new ideas work and what a difference they make. Site inspections last year by more than 7 state and federal agencies all resulted in high rankings and glowing praise. The detention facility set a record in 2003 with 6,900 persons being booked in. The most significant accomplishment at the county fair has been the Glacier Ice Rink construction. Phase 1 of the capital project, which includes roof insulation, sprinkler and fire protection, walls and insulation, will be completed this ice season. Phase 2, beginning this year, includes constructing a new locker room building, extending the existing walls to the ground, stripping and remodeling the building on the west side of the rink, a new mechanical room, and a 112-ton ice plant. The commissioners joined the fair board last week in a tour of the grounds and buildings, and it's obvious that there are a great number of improvements and repairs needed. The buildings are very old and in some cases almost falling down. I hope we can find some way to provide for the necessary funds to repair or replace them. Noxious weeds are one of our more controversial issues. The public has a lot of interest in what can be done about weeds. The Weed District worked with the Montana Department of Transportation to develop and implement an integrated road right-of-way vegetation management program. This plan has been adopted by other counties, and we were just informed that $200,000 in federal funding will be available to western Montana to ensure implementation of the plan with new construction projects. Last year's spring brought lots of mosquitoes and concern about West Nile virus. Fortunately, none of the mosquitoes tested positive for the virus, but unfortunately, it's expected that the virus will be found in Missoula this coming season. The Historical Museum is working with an exhibit designer to install a major new temporary exhibit titled Following in the Footsteps Before and After Lewis and Clark, which will open on March 28th. This will be the museum's biggest exhibit ever. It's funded from grants from the National Park Service, the Montana Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Commission, and the Institute of Museum and Library Services for a total of over $40,000. The county library is very pleased with the renovation of the entryway. Next, the downstairs will be recarpeted, the Montana room remodeled, and they will begin retrofitting the HVAC systems. They have checked out more books, videos, audiobooks, and CDs than ever before. Over 60,000 folks have library cards, and they see nearly 6,000 patrons per week. Their Sunday hours have been a great success. The clerk of court's office is making strides in the technology area and has purchased 4 scanners that will provide easy access to the documents most often asked for. This will help their department operate more efficiently. Missoula County's juvenile court population continues to grow. Youth court officers appeared in over 989 district court hearings last year alone. Drug-related offenses are clearly on the increase. Between 2000 and 2001, youth court handled a total of 189 drug-related intakes. Between 2000 and 2003, that number jumped to 326. First-time offenders closely mirror last year's statistics. Cases handled informally by a youth court officer, not a district court judge, have remained fairly constant over the last few years. Much work has been done in the areas of early intervention and prevention. Missoula County is one of 10 national demonstration sites chosen from a field of over 30 applicants for federal assistance to examine and develop ways to handle the difficulties inherent in juvenile cases. Implementation will provide a boost to their ability to deliver the right services at the proper time for kids in our county, as well as serve as a model for other jurisdictions nationally. Youth Court's intensive supervision program home arrest program, and pretrial supervision program all provide in-home supervision for kids in our community who would more than likely end up spending time in a detention center or state institution. Funds from your tax dollars help to secure the continuation of these supervision services for kids in our community. The County Park Board has awarded over $30,000 in matching grants to parks and recreation sites in the county. We plan to install a new restroom facility at the Fort Missoula Regional Park this year, and last year we spent almost $50,000 for maintenance of that park. The Clerk and Recorder Office will be implementing new federal and state laws that will affect all or most all citizens in Missoula County. The most significant challenge will be to implement election reform. Identification will be required at all polling places. There will be provisional voting, redistricting of the House and Senate boundaries, and new election equipment. Due to all these changes, we will need to hire more election judges. Staffing at the polling places will be a critical need for the county. I would ask you all to consider any way you can help us in this need. If you can free up an employee for the day or serve yourself, it would be greatly appreciated. Please call Vicki Zier at 258-4751 at the county if you can help. And Vicki has made sure that every table has some brochures and information about the new voting laws, and please do give her a call if you can help. She's going to need it. We're all going to need it. The Partnership Health Center suffered a significant operating loss in fiscal year 2002. The loss was primarily due to errors and delays in billings, less than expected medical encounters, and higher than expected pharmacy costs. New management in fiscal year 2003 has already made significant changes that have turned the organization around. Fiscal year 2004 projections indicate positive cash flow for the year. One of the things we're committed to achieving is the removal of the Milltown Dam. Barbara feels that this will get done, but that we must continue our efforts on this. Growth seems to be a topic of major concern all over the country. I think she made, maybe country, maybe county. You no doubt saw the articles in the Missoulian this last weekend on the subject. Everyone seems to have a different solution for what they perceive as the problem. She sees it as a complex issue with no single answer. The more growth that occurs, the more frustration there is with the reduction of our own space. There are complaints about the loss of space, loss of views, density, size of the new dwellings, location of the new dwellings, how many folks can live in the dwellings, etc. At the same time, we wish that we had a broader tax base so more folks would help carry the load. We don't want less service, just less taxes. One of the stated goals of the 6-year growth management process was to encourage infill and to discourage urban sprawl. Yet the citizens in the neighborhoods where the infill is being allowed are very unhappy with it, and many folks want to build and live outside the urban area, and they have every legal right to do so. There has been a study going on for the last couple of years as to whether impact fees should be adopted by the city and or the county. The rationale for this is that new development should pay for the services they require. Barbara does not support impact fees for the following reasons. The developer of each project is required to put in roads, curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. Those costs are passed on to the buyers of the buildings. They then pay taxes, which should pay for the other services received from government. The amounts that could be charged are based on square footage of the building and have not yet been adopted, but each fee will add to the cost of the dwellings, whether it's a business or a residence. If a store such as Lowe's had to pay such fees based on the numbers she has seen, it would have cost them around $900,000 just for the privilege of building here. Lowe's employs over 100 people and pays them good wages. Those jobs might not exist if they had to pay such impact fees. They also pay substantial taxes into the city and county coffers. Without such businesses, the tax load would not expand. If each new dwelling increases in cost, the number of folks that could have a new home will be affected. Currently, the FHA has increased the allowable price of homes in Missoula to around $183,000. That requires a minimum $40,000 income to qualify. Missoula is the only county in the state where they have raised the allowance to this level. Home ownership in Missoula is less than 50%. The state has a home ownership rate near 69%, and nationally the rate is 66%. The median income for a family of four in Missoula is $44,800. That's the median. Certainly many folks do not have that high an income. The average price of a house is $177,000. Part of the reason for this is the high price of land. People want to live here because we have a wonderful quality of life. The higher the demand, the higher the price. Barbara doesn't believe that impact fees will improve this situation. She believes it will make it worse. The economic benefit of new construction in the first year alone to Missoula would be 1,714 jobs, over $58 million in local business income, over $47 million in local salaries, and over $3 million in local government revenue. A new home buyer can expect to pay nearly $5,000 in existing permits and proposed impact fees. Unlike taxes, impact fees become part of the 30-year mortgage. The eventual cost becomes 4 times the original fees imposed. Since 1997, permits and fees have increased by 380%, she writes. If these fees are adopted, what will be the result? She thinks it will cause the very things government says they don't want to prevent. It will cost several $1,000s more to build in the area where impact fees are imposed. What would you do? Build outside the area? Of course. If you were a business thinking of coming here, would you pay such outrageous fees just for the privilege? She doesn't think so. And if you did, how would you make up for the cost? You'd increase the cost of the merchandise to the customers. We would pay for it. So the end result will not be infill, a broadened tax base, more jobs, and more home ownership. It will be just the opposite. Yes, the growth will continue. It's against the law for government to deprive people of their property rights. What we need to do, she says, is to identify the things that make our county a great place to live and do everything within the law to protect those things, but not at the expense of common sense or the risk of lawsuits. So I think in closing, we can sum up that Missoula County is in good shape now financially, and we're also in good shape, I think, with the way we generally try and work things out together. Certainly the Board of County Commissioners works very well together. We disagree with one another from time to time, but we disagree in a very respectful manner, and we know that at the very next meeting, we'll be working on ways to find solutions to the problems before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carey. We appreciate you stepping in on such short notice for Barb, and hope that you would pass on to her that we wish Alan a quick and complete recovery. We are now going to move on to the part of the agenda that allows for questions and answers, and I would like to invite Vicki Judd to come to the podium and begin facilitating that process.
Mary Lou Wilton here in the green has a microphone, so that, oh, I'm sorry, Justine Morris at the rear also has one, so we can circulate that mic so that the questions can be heard. So if you'll raise your hands high, we'll try and get a microphone to you, and you're welcome to ask anything of either Mayor Kadis or Commissioner Carey. Don't all ask at once. Here we go. Thank you.
My question is for Mayor Kadis. In your presentation, you mentioned that you meet with other cities, Billings, Great Falls, Helena, and Kalispell. And on your chart here, they refer to, in this pamphlet, the third coast. And on your chart, Great Falls was pretty steady, Billings was growing very little. I've talked to some folks in our community that say we were just like Boise 20 years ago. Do you try to contact those cities that have already, I guess, experienced this growth and find out what their struggles were when they were trying to work through the city issues and stuff?
We do try to have some communications. I've met with the planning director for Salt Lake and the former mayor of Spokane and the former mayor of Boise. So there is some communication there. I don't think there's nearly enough. I mean, I think that if you look around the Rocky Mountain West, you see a number of those cities, Boise, Spokane, Salt Lake, Denver, the whole Rocky Mountain front, that looked at and faced 4% and 5% growth rates. Well, we're looking at 2%, and we kind of got our hands full with that. So one of the concerns I have is that, you know, we're really underestimating what's about to happen to us. And there is a body of knowledge and expertise that's out there, though, you know, and there are things that we can learn. They all have their success stories. I think mostly, though, they have their failures. You know, you look at how the West has developed over the last 20 years, it's kind of all the same, big strips with big stores.
Thank you. I have a question here in front. Thanks, Mary Lou.
Mayor Kadis, if Barb Evans' comments on impact fees were point, would you mind giving counterpoint?
Not at all. Thank you. I think the fact of the matter is, I mean, the way you do impact fees, it's a fairly rigorous kind of analytical study that has to be done. And if you don't do that, they're illegal, just kind of right out of the chutes. So a couple years ago, we hired a firm out of New Jersey, I think, Tischler and Associates, and this is what they do professionally, and they have a great reputation around the country. And essentially, what we're trying to do is cover the costs in terms of infrastructure to our community that new growth is responsible for. Now, Barbara makes the point that when new development goes in, they build the streets and the curbs for that new development. But there are other impacts besides that. I mean, they ought to pay for that. But you know, if you're building an area, you know, let's say Mullen Road, and do you think all that new development's going to have an impact on the intersection of Mullen and Reserve? Well, probably. Now, that's not one of the fees that we've got in this group that we're looking at. It probably should be, but what our consultant told us is that, well, you're going to have a hard time doing transportation fees because of the way transportation is funded. But there are other things like that. We do a fee for sewer right now. It's $1,400. It used to be $350. And the thing is, you know, when we increased that about 4 or 5 years ago, it had been $350 for 25 years. And part of our problem is that, you know, there was a recognition a long time ago that, yeah, that's an appropriate fee to help pay back the people who have built that wastewater treatment plant and built it with extra capacity, so that when people came along and wanted to build a new house, we didn't have to go through the process of building additional capacity. We already built it. It was more cost effective to do it that way. And so they're paying us back for that now. But we didn't keep up with it. We didn't change those figures over time. We didn't inflate them. It's a difficult challenge, I think, because I agree with Barbara that affordability is a huge issue. But affordability interweaves with quality of life. People want to live here because it's a great place to live. And we're in the position now where if we don't do impact fees or some other tools like that, we will not be able to maintain the current level of infrastructure that we currently have, because we're subsidizing that with general taxpayers right now to the extent that we're able to keep up. And I guess I'm convinced that we won't be able to keep up. We will have to, so the newer neighborhoods will have less amenities, and they will have a lesser level of quality of life than the older neighborhoods. Also, the older neighborhoods will suffer as well because we will be spread thinner. Right now, we've worked on these fees a lot with the development community. We just had another meeting this morning, and I think we're about to the point where we're going to refer this to the council and let the council kind of figure it out the last step or two. But right now, the fees for a residence are in the neighborhood of, I think they go from around $500 to around $700, maybe $800 per household, depending on the size of the household. For a $150,000 house, that doesn't seem like a whole lot to me. Also, if you look at what's happened to housing prices in Missoula over the last 15 years, it's been increasing an average of $7,000 per house for each of the last 10 years. I mean, that's huge. And to tell me that, well, the market's causing that, and so that's okay, and so we're going to keep raising those prices, and not that, well, we can't afford to pay back the rest of the community for these costs that we're adding, you know, which are an order of magnitude less, you know, it just doesn't wash with me. So, thank you for the question. Let me add one thing. The growth game is on your agenda, and or growth puzzle. We changed it because it's not a game. I do want to, we're going to set some up on tables after we're done with all the talk so that you can actually kind of get your hands on something. You know, I guess you can get your hands on my throat too, but we won't do that. And there's 2 hours set aside for that. I hope you don't feel like you have to stay here for 2 hours if you want to participate. Most of the times that we've shown this to folks, usually we take about an hour. You can easily spend 2 hours wrestling with it. But, you know, if I'd encourage you to stay, even if it's for just 10 minutes, to kind of get your hands on it and kind of see how challenging what we have to face is.
Thank you. We have a question at the back.
I'm wondering if, what the status is of the website corridor changes and what you're thinking.
Over the last several years, we have wrestled with the stretch of Broadway from Russell to Orange in particular. We petitioned the state a couple of times to put in to signalize Broadway, California, and Toole. Because of the pedestrian safety issues that we've had there, we've had a couple of people killed, and there are a number of accidents that happen in that area. The state refused to do that. They felt that it wasn't warranted and would create a larger traffic hazard. And they responded to us that they suggested that we should look at what is sometimes called a road diet, or taking the two four-lane, the four-lane arterial, 2 lanes in each direction, and changing it to 1 lane with a center turn lane. And that their experience shows that that has worked well in other communities. It doesn't diminish capacity, but does increase safety. So we started out on an analysis to look at that, and we hired a consultant. And they came back and showed us, I think pretty clearly in my mind, and I know not everyone shares this, that we could maintain the existing capacity. We would decrease significantly the number of pedestrian accidents, and an added bonus, we would decrease the number of vehicular accidents if we went ahead and did this change. That sounded like a pretty good deal to both myself and the majority of the council last fall. And so the council approved that, and the consultants have been working on it. With the new council, I think that, I don't know if that motion would pass today. I know there are a number of council members who are opposed to it. The problem we have now is that we've spent quite a bit of state money on this, in the order of $130,000, and we're just about to put it in. So what I've tried to do with the state and with the council is try to encourage at least a test here. If we pull back on the project right now, we'll have to pay the state back $130,000. And that's money that would have to come out of our general fund. And I don't believe we can afford that, particularly I still believe the project will work. So what the state has agreed is that if we go ahead and put it in, and if it works, it stays in. If it doesn't work, that is, traffic capacity is diminished, then they will agree to take it out after a year test. So that's kind of where I'm at this point. I think it's important to go ahead and give it a try. I know that it is, it doesn't seem like it'll work to a lot of people. How can you move more traffic? How can you move the same amount of traffic with 3 lanes that you were moving with 4 lanes? There's an explanation for that, and the traffic engineers, the people who do this for a living, day in, day out, say that yes, that can be done, and it's not that difficult. I think we need to give it a try and see how it works, and if it doesn't work, then we'll take it out, and the state has agreed to do that. But if it does work, we've gone so far down the line that I can't justify spending $130,000 of general fund money to back up on it.
The same engineers that designed Mullen and
The question was, are those the same engineers who designed Mullen and Reserve? And no, I don't know. I don't know if they are. I kind of doubt that they are. Traffic is a real challenge for us, roads in particular, because Reserve is a classic example of what's known in the business as induced demand. You build a nice big road, and you figure if everything stays the same, the way it was, then the capacity on this road will be good for the next 15, 20 years. But what happens when you build a nice big road is all those people out in the hinterlands who have been kind of sitting there quietly and conserving their trips because it was so darn hard to get across town, all of a sudden discover that it's easy to get across town, and so they start using it, and you use up the capacity almost immediately. And that has been a very difficult thing for planners in particular to try to figure out and to anticipate. The other part of our problem is our funding. I mean, we were able to fund $22 million on reserve about 5 or 6 years ago from a number of different resources, and we were able to finally get it done. But it was probably as much dumb luck that we were able to get done what we got done on reserve. Right now, Council will be considering an EIS to rebuild Russell Street, which is between Broadway and Mount, and then also 3rd between Russell and Reserve. And there are huge capacity problems there. I think anybody who has waited in that interior core arterial understands that that road needs some attention. We've spent $2 million on the EIS, and essentially regardless of which version of the fix we do, we're looking at $40 million to rebuild, essentially, it's like three, maybe 4 miles of road. And we have to pay, we can pay for the bridge part, which is $7 or $8 million from state funds. But the rest of it is going to come from our local state allocation. And that is about $1.3 million of what we call urban funds and a little less than $1 million of congestion mitigation funds. So, at best, $2 million a year, $2.5 million a year, and we put it all to this one project, we won't be able to do another thing in the rest of the community for 10 or 15 years. And that is a huge dilemma for us. I mean, it is a curve that we have a hard time keeping up with and trying to figure out what to do.
Thank you. George?
I regret having to speak about transportation, but we have most of the major business and property owners of Brook Street meet this morning. And we are concerned, and by the way, the group that met represents over 150 small and large business owners. And this is a question to both of you because I believe both of you are on the Transportation Policy Committee. But we are, I would say, the mood of the group who have attended 9 years of public hearings, and it's not too easy as a business person to go to all these public hearings and to respect the community at large, but obviously we're trying to find a good solution to our community traffic problems in that area. But if I were to represent what was represented in that meeting of business and property owners, it was concerned, shocked, disbelief, puzzled, and frustrated to think that there's a possibility that the Brook Street present plan that's had about $1.5 million spent on it, that it might be under question. Is that a possibility?
I share your concerns. I think we need to go ahead and finish the Brook South Russell project. Hopefully, we had hoped to do that this summer. That kind of depends right now on right-of-way acquisition and on whether the feds get their transportation bill passed. There is a lot of opposition, and I think we had a tie vote on the council not too long ago that I broke the tie in favor of continuing, that we wanted to stop and that essentially we would accept refunding $1.5 million again out of the general fund, which I think is crazy for us to consider. I appreciate that you met this morning, and I hope that you got a list of the folks on council who haven't supported this, and you go talk to them, because I've tried, and you can see how much success I've had.
Land in the county. Most often, the developers and developers' agents have followed the rules that the state has set out, and we don't have any choice to say, no, we don't like it, or no, that's too many cars, or what have you. We generally have to say, okay, you're good to go. So we end up contributing to a terribly worsening problem. I mean, I'm like everybody else in this room, I think. I hop in my car, generally. I drove from the courthouse to here for this meeting. I didn't have the choice in terms of time to do otherwise, really. I love riding the bus. I love walking, riding my bike. It's just often a luxury when I'm able to do that. So somehow we've got to find a way to move people into sharing rides, whatever, but we can't continue to rely on the way we're getting about town now, I don't think, and have any quality of life to speak of in 20 years or so.
Are there other further questions? There we go. They're just shy.
I was just wondering if you guys thought about maybe doing that curbside recycling program.
The issue comes up periodically. I think from the city government perspective, if we ran the waste disposal system, Jim, then I think it would be much more of an option. Jim works for BFI, if you don't know. There are several cities in Montana that do run all or part of the trash pickup and disposal. We don't do that in Missoula. And as a consequence, I think that the recycling and waste disposal are really integrated, and there are economies of scale that can happen there. I know BFI does some pickup, but I think that it's limited. I wish that it could be more. I also know there's a private company that does some limited pickup in particular neighborhoods. I don't see the city getting into that business anytime in the near future. I think we have so many other pressing issues that we couldn't get in and make that work and make it work economically. So I think it's really up to I think it's Missoula Valley Recycling and BFI and public pressure to encourage them to step up to it more than they are doing now.
We still have some more time, so I'd certainly encourage any other questions. It's a great opportunity for those. Nope? Okay, seeing none, let me take an opportunity before I turn it back to Bob Boshi to thank all of you for coming. We're honored to have you here and very thrilled to be able to sponsor this event, so thank you very much. Bob?
Thank you, Vicki. And I do want to, before we depart today, thank Dan Carlino in the back and folks here at the DoubleTree for preparing our meal and preparing this facility for our use today. Dan, thank you. And to thank Vicki and her committee for organizing this, and certainly Mayor Katis and Commissioner Carey for sharing their time and thoughts with us and answering questions for us. But most importantly, I think I want to thank each of you for investing your time today, the interest and participation that you show in the issues that are important to the future of our community are key. And I think as we've heard in the comments from Mayor Katis, there's a great need for leadership, not just in our state, but certainly in our community. And the leadership that we need is going to determine how well we address, how well we meet the challenges that are going to face us as this continued growth comes to our area, and certainly hope that each of you consider yourself a part of that leadership and are also willing and interested in continuing to be involved in the process of discussion and resolution of the many challenges that we have. So thanks for your time today. I hope that you found it valuable to you, and I think it's valuable to our community. As Mayor Katis indicated, if you have the time, I think it'd certainly be very interesting for you if you could stick for a little while and participate in this puzzle exercise and to maybe get your hands around a little bit more closely what we're facing as a community with the available space we have and the growth we're facing. So thank you again. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine in Missoula. Appreciate it.
I'll go start clearing some tables. Do you have a other staff things, Mike, that are going to do this with you.